Y'all, we are live right here in the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Baptist Church in Renton. And we're here celebrating 60 years since the March on Washington, 60 years. And we're excited to be here with someone who was actually there, Mr. Lem Howell, a retired civil rights attorney. Lem, how are you? And tell us, what does this theme, Dream Unfinished, what does this mean to you?
Well, I don't know if it's the same as the Unfinished Symphony, but when we say Dream Unfinished, that March on Washington, what has evolved is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech, which was which came about as a result of Mahalia Jackson saying, "Tell them about the dream, Martin."
Right, right.
And Dr. King went back to a theme that he had developed some 10 months before in Detroit. And we say it's a dream unfinished because some of the objectives of the march were achieved in very short order. In 1964, a year after the march, we got the 1964 Civil Rights Law. In 1965, we got the Voting Rights Law. We got an increase in the minimum wage. We were concerned about police brutality. There's been some, mostly on the states, but the Justice Department also has a role. In fact, right here in Seattle, we had the Justice Department sued about police use of excessive force in the city. And I think the judge still has to decide whether he's going to retain jurisdiction. So, in a sense, there have been some achievements. The minimum wage went up, but not enough. Mm. But so some of the goals of the Civil Rights March were achieved. But when you say it's unfinished, it means there's still a long way to go. And it seems as though when we make progress, the Supreme Court reverses it with throwing out race being a consideration for admission to colleges, which is terrible because you can consider geography and you can say parentage, you can consider anything else, but you can't consider race. That makes no sense to me if you want a diversified student population. So it's a long way to go. And we see it's unfinished because we see what the governor of Florida is trying to do with banning books and prescribing what should be, the state is prescribing what should be in classes to be taught in school. That strikes me as being autocratic, like a lot of dictators would have it. And it's like the book by Orwell, 1984, coming true. Right. It's very disturbing. So I think when we say it's unfinished, it's almost like eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. Eternal vigilance is our price for civil rights.
I see why everyone loves you. They were like, you've got to interview Lem Howell. Like, he was actually at the march. Tell us about that. You started earlier. You were like, I remember the day. Tell us about that.
Well, I was working for the Exchange Commission as a law student at NYU Law School at that time. And I didn't tell them that I was taking the day off. They might have told me I couldn't have it.
Right. Just took the day, yeah.
Took the day off and went down to Washington. My wife's cousin, Norma, was working as a social worker in New York City, and they rented a bus. And I got on the bus.
Wow.
Early in the morning, and we drove down from New York City to and we gathered at the Washington Monument.
Wow.
And then marched to the Lincoln Memorial. Now, there were strict instructions that you didn't form by groups from states or anything. Everybody got
Mm,
there and marched as a group. It was
mm,
a nice sunny day and everybody was happy.
nice.
So we all walked to, and I was right up front before the Lincoln Memorial.
Mm,
And it was also very unifying. We had Jewish rabbis. We had Eugene Carson Blake, who was head of the national churches, and we had uh, labor leader Walter Reuther spoke, and he
mm,
was a progressive, and he was, you know, he was such a progressive labor leader. They gave their interest on their strike fund to the great workers, the
mm,
grapes and so
mm.
forth.
Wow.
So it was a real progressive thing. But I don't think enough credit is given to A. Philip Randolph.
Mm,
A. Philip Randolph, back in 1941, had threatened a march on Washington to FDR unless discrimination was abolished in, uh, in, in defense
mm-hmm,
industries. And so when FDR agreed to sign the FEPC uh, executive order,
mm-hmm,
then he did cancel the March on Washington.
mm,
But then it came up after that and so forth. And finally, they got all the civil rights organizations get together. SNCC, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the NAACP, CORE, Urban League, and everybody. And as I said, labor and the religious community to get together to plan this march on Washington.
mm,
And it was a grand affair. My brother, who was a New York City policeman, was a monitor for the group, but there was no violence. It was just
mm,
perfect.
mm.
And I want to tell you, I was never so inspired as when Dr. King said, ended. He was supposed to speak 4 minutes. He spoke 16 minutes. And Mahalia Jackson said, tell them about the dream, Martin. And he
Mm,
did. He abandoned his written text and went into his dream.
mm,
And when he ended it, so we will at last, black men, white men,
mm,
Jews and Gentiles will all be able to sing at last. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we're free at last. One of the most emotional moments I can remember of any public speeches I have ever heard. It was like the whole spirit of the whole body went up.
mm,
And even President Kennedy, who was worried about violence and had the attorney general, his brother, monitored to make sure that there was no violence, was very pleased with Dr. King's speech. And it got great press. NBC, CBS, and ABC all covered it. And it was wonderful. And there was a good spirit of the march. And I still remember, although she wasn't in the program, but I remember Lena Horne saying two words, freedom now. I
mm,
still recall her saying that. But Walter Reuther spoke, A. Philip Randolph spoke, and we know that John Lewis spoke, and MLK Jr. spoke. It was a wonderful, wonderful occasion.
mm.
And so it's fitting that it should be continued and remembered, and the goals that were striven for then continue to be our goals today.
I love that so much. Now, we talked about the current theme of this kickoff on the actual 60th anniversary, the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday leading up to August 28th. The theme is Dream Unfinished, not a commemoration, but a continuation. And we said moving forward, this is the beginning of a full year-long amplification of, like you said, what you experienced, the real change happens on a continual basis, right? It's a gerund, it's an ing, it's continuing. right? The dream, continuing the dream. What would you say to people about the continuation?
You know, it's a funny thing. Do you remember when Barack Obama came out in Chicago after his election and the big meeting in Chicago? Uh, Reverend Jackson was
Mm-hmm.
crying.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot
Yes.
of people didn't know why. I don't care what he says, he's crying because that was part of the dream to see
Mm,
that one day a black man could be president of the United States. That was actuality.
mm,
That and that was part of the dream.
yes.
So, but then, you know, when we say it continues, we have to watch for those who would turn the dream back or
Mm,
cancel any progress we made, like the Supreme Court decision on affirmative action. We have to be very careful that we speak with a united voice
mm,
and we have to go forward. It's not over, it's continuing.
mm. I love that. I love that so much. Now, right now, you're sitting with me. You just did an official interview with the Griot Project, and I'm grateful, right? This is work that we've been leading, meaning the National Black MBA Association. This is an organization that's been around for 52 years, focused on economic and intellectual empowerment. And what's exciting is we're leading a series here in Seattle that I actually started. It's called the Better Together Empowerment Series, right? It's focused on three things: really achieving equity and inclusion in business and in life. It's focused on Black businesses and Black wealth. It's also focused on empowering our youth. So this empowerment series, this Better Together empowerment series, is about a continuation. It's doing the work. It's really uniting people. So when you hear the words better together, can you start your sentence by saying, it's better together because?
It's better together because with unity, strength. Let me tell you something. I've always said this, or struck me, with all our professional athletes and entertainers, and I'm sure they have various charities that they give to. But I really think they should form a PAC, a
Mm,
political PAC, with at least $50 million. Each of them give $1 million
mm,
for the race. Give $1 million
mm,
that they can affect candidates and so forth throughout the country. There's a PAC for everything, and a lot
mm,
of these wealthy right wingers,
mm,
sponsor a lot of that. In fact, they were the ones that got some of these Asian kids to challenge affirmative action. Now,
mm,
we should have a PAC, a political PAC out there. And I'm saying that entertainers and wealthy businessmen and athletes could contribute at least $1 million apiece or more and form a big PAC to do something politically.
mm. I love
And
it.
I think it could be very effective if they contribute to that and
Yes.
that we have a program and we support candidates
Mm-hmm.
who will push our program.
I
Because the
love it.
right wingers do it all the time.
Mm-hmm. Y'all, you heard it right here. We're gonna creating multiple clips and documents from this because it's so important that people hear your voice and hear the wisdom.
I think, we have the wherewithal and do,
Mm-hmm.
and I think Oprah can give more, and but I think that a lot of we have a unified interest. We
Yes.
want to see progress of the race. You say
Yes.
economically, politically,
Yes.
we should be supporting candidates who buy into our
Mm-hmm.
program.
Agreed.
And one way we can do that is with a political action committee.
Hmm. I love it. Love it. Now tell me a little bit more about this concept. We talked earlier about the ideals of living powerfully. When you hear the term living powerfully, what does that word mean to you?
Meaning that we should have greater say so in the policies of this country. I think it's good that we get together. I'm all
Hmm.
for that because unity is good. But we should have a program that is an outreach program
Mm,
where we can effectuate what happens in this country. And we have the economic power that's lying dormant,
mm,
and it's got to come up. So living powerfully means having our program move to the front.
I love it. Now you're a retired civil rights activist. Excuse me, a retired civil rights attorney. You're also an activist. You were there during the march. So when people hear you speak, it's like igniting a fire. Like you are what it means to have, be a living legacy in Black history. So I just want to say thank you again for always showing up, stuff like this. But anytime anyone needs you, like you're there, you're a community leader. So what would you say to people who aren't necessarily taking action? Living powerfully does mean acting. It's not about sitting, it's not about not doing, it's about doing things differently. What would you say to encourage someone to activate?
Well, I discovered early on in my life, when I was 8 years old, that politics can determine so much. I was state president of Young Democrats when I first came to the state back in 1964, and I announced the vote back in 1984 at the Democratic Convention for the state of Washington in San Francisco when Willie Brown was mayor.
Hmm.
All right, and I've been active in the Democratic Party ever since I'm a PCO and have been for
What does
a
that
number of
mean?
years, precinct committee officer
Oh.
in the Democratic Party. And I really believe that if you be active in the Democratic Party, because I'm a big D Democrat, and I don't shy away from that
Mm-hmm.
because I think they offer more progress for this country than other splinter groups
Mm-hmm.
or the so-called Republicans. When 6 out of 8 Republican candidates for president say they would support a man who is convicted of a crime to be president of the United States, this country is in deep trouble. And I think we have to make our voices heard.
Mm,
And I think that, when they talk about banning books
right.
and telling what, telling us, the state telling us what should be the curriculum that's being taught in school, that's like Hitler during
Right.
before World War II. We don't need that here. And I'm surprised the ACLU and other civic organizations don't get up and condemn this for what it is. And I think our voice should be there too.
I love it. I'm from Florida, so I'm a little embarrassed. Born and raised in Florida, that they're literally trying to rewrite history and identify slavery as some type of
Yeah, can you? It's slavery's good.
that it was training.
Right, you can develop a trade if you have slavery. That is shocking.
It's ridiculous. I have to laugh so I don't cry.
Right, and we have to promote books like the latest book by she did The Warmth of Other Suns, and she just did this book on it's one title. Help me, Witherspoon. Oh, she did The Warmth of Other Sun, Cast. She did Cast. We should get this in our reading list throughout.
Do y'all see how sharp his mind is? Did y'all see that? Did you watch the wheels turning? That was beautiful. That was beautiful. I love it. So I think we have someone else coming behind me. I'm not sure. How much time do I have, guys? Guys, how much time do I have? Okay. Okay, got it. So we're gonna keep talking real quick. So, Mr. Lim, if we had to really pause and talk to some young people. So imagine how old are you now?
87.
What? I love it. Now, if you could go back in history and talk to 16-year-old Lim based on lessons learned that you have today, what would you tell 16-year-old Lim? Something you know now that you wish you knew then.
No. Have you got 2 days?
We got a little time, apparently. You got 60 seconds. What would you tell Lim? You literally get a time machine.
I would tell youngsters today, read, read, read. Do more reading. That's so important because that's so important in communication. If I had youngsters who think about law school, I'd say be either history or an English major and do a whole lot of reading because communication is important and you've got to know. My father used to say, what you have up here, they can't take away from you. And so I would encourage all our youngsters to do more reading.
That's beautiful. Any other elements of your that you would tell young Lem or that you would want to share with our youth?
I would say develop good study habits. I
Mm.
didn't have any study habits.
Mm-hmm.
My wife gave our daughters good study habits and they've achieved magnificently beyond our wildest dreams. In fact, if I may brag,
Please.
my daughter Helen is head of the King County Regional Homeless Authority. She's the interim director now. That's my oldest daughter. My second daughter is head of OBGYN at the University Medical School, and my wife and I are flying back to Washington in October for her induction in the National Academy of Medicine. I am so proud to stand at the ceiling. Yes. My granddaughters have done the same. Really? Achieved beyond measure. So what I'm telling you, the sky's the limit. Get a good education and do a lot of reading and get good study habits.
I love it. Now, I love that you just said that. So you touched your brain. You were like, what's up here can never be taken away.
That's exactly.
So part of our Living Powerfully series, part of our we call it the Living Powerfully experience. It's about mindset. It's the work that I love to do. So my company is called It's All Bigger Than Me Consulting. It's consulting, coaching, training, and transformations. It's all about how do we transform basically as a community by transforming as individuals, right? So really using the power of the mind, the neuroscience of the mind, cognitive behavioral psychology, positive psychology, performance science. So there's a book called Positive Intelligence. I've read like 1,000 books to your point. Like I was a bit of a nerd. I loved reading. I couldn't get enough of it growing up. I just loved it. But right now I feel like it's where all these seeds have been planted. And now I get to show up in community in a way even more powerfully than I have in the past, helping people to think about mindset. So we're going to be actually launching a $100,000 Living Powerfully giveaway, giving away training to help people live their best life, right? Literally take a minimization of their saboteurs. You remember that scene from the Oscars where Will Smith walked up on stage and slapped Chris Rock? Do you remember that?
Yes.
So
doesn't everybody?
Well, I show that at the beginning of my training. So I'm like, that's a perfect example of where it's called the saboteurs that took over, and Will Smith, took an action.
Remember what Denzel said to him?
No, what did he say?
When you're at the top of your game, the devil will come after you.
See,
the devil is alive and well, and you got to resist. Part of the Lord's Prayer is lead us not into temptation. The tempter is out there.
Right. We call them saboteurs. Even if you think about it was self-sabotage, right? It was something in his mind that instead of him looking at his wife's face and seeing her roll her eyes and him touching her hand and saying, "Baby, I love you. You're so beautiful." Think about how calming that could have been. Instead, he flashed back to his father harming his mother, and he thought he was protecting his wife.
That is part of what has been inherited from
right
the whip of the slave master.
Preach.
Because it's violence. They violated us. And then sometimes some of our men folk violate by hitting women too. And that is bad. We got post-traumatic. That was so powerful of Dr. King when he said
peace. Yes.
Non-violence.
Yes. Let's talk about that.
And when he went to India, he said to India, when I go to other countries, I'm a visitor. When I come to India, I'm a pilgrim. So he learned from Mahatma Gandhi. So we've got to put through the heroes that are the real heroes of our society. The Mahatma Gandhi, the Mandelas, the Martin Luther King Jr.,
Yes. I love that. So the words that are right next to you, I'm gonna angle up a little bit. You said you like those. The two words that are to your above your head. One says love and the other
Faith.
says faith. Tell me about those two words and what they mean
Well,
to you.
I think of, I'm not a minister, you
Mm-hmm.
understand, but I
Mm-hmm.
think of the Old and the New Testament. I think of the Old Testament justice and the New Testament love,
Mm,
all right? And Micah 6, verse 8. Walk humbly with your God,
mm,
all right? And faith is part of that. The good Lord has been very good to me,
mm,
so good to me. I'm so grateful. But I don't wear it on my sleeve.
right.
You know, people can't tell whether I'm a Baptist,
Right.
Presbyterian, Unitarian, or whatever I am. But I think faith in God is important,
Mm,
and I think we have to be guided by it. But Jesus brought
mm,
love into this.
yes.
So in spite of man's waywardness, Jesus brought love,
Yes.
agape, into our life.
I love it. I think there are two other words over here you want to talk about, and that's peace and joy. The work that we're doing with our Living Powerfully series is called Living Powerfully Through Positive Intelligence. And it's positive intelligence that helps with performance, but it also helps with joy and peace. So tell us the peace within, right? That power of being at peace no matter what's happening around you. Talk about that power.
The Protestant churches have a good procedure that, and I think the Catholic Church too, passing the peace.
Mm,
Peace is good. Peace is good.
like peace be with you
Peace be with you.
and also with you.
Hey, isn't that a great?
So beautiful, yes.
Peace
Hmm.
be with you.
Peace be with you.
You have to
Yes.
be peace with yourself
Within.
and with a man upstairs.
I love it. Last question, joy.
Joy. We should appreciate the joy of life.
Mm,
Life is a great benefit to you,
mm,
and love life.
right.
Be grateful to the man above that he gave you life.
Mm,
Joy, joy of life.
I love it. You are joy. You just show up radiance.
When I have to select jurors,
Yes.
all right, one of the things that I talk the joy of life,
Mm.
and the jurors who respond to joy of life. And then you have some
Mhm.
like a chicken's anus. What joy?
What joy? You're like, I don't need him.
Enjoy life.
Right.
Life is wonderful.
I love it.
I'm so grateful that the man has given me 87 years.
Then last question. What do you want people to say about you when you're gone?
You know what Thurgood used to say?
Mm.
When he Thurgood
Yes.
used to tell them I did what I could with what I had.
Say it again.
I did what I could with what I had.
I love it. Thank you so much. Any final words you want to share?
So thank you for asking those questions.
Yes.
Makes me happy.
Contribute. Then let me ask you the last thing. Look in the camera and say, start your statement with join us and tell people why they should join us.
Well, I think blacks should stick together. I think they should have other allies.
Mm,
It's very important that we are united and that we move forward because, as I said before, the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. The price of our rights is eternal vigilance.
mm,
When somebody's trying to take away or abridge our rights, we should stand up and say no.
mm. You heard it here, folks. Thank you so much, Lem. Mwah. Thank you.